An interim deal signed between the US and Iran, and the first round of talks on detailed implementation due tomorrow in Switzerland.
It was not easy, I can tell you.
The 14-point text extends a ceasefire announced in April, giving another 60 days for negotiations to reach a final deal. The Memorandum of Understanding draws up management of Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium, with terms still to be hammered out as part of the final deal. Washington lifting sanctions and allowing Iran to resume its export of oil. Mediator Pakistan saying the deal demonstrates commitment to a diplomatic resolution. The Swiss government also confirmed initial talks are planned at the Bergenstock resort. One major issue is already off the table. The agreement does not specifically address Tehran's ballistic missile program. Has been a long-standing concern both for Washington and for Israel. Iran adamant that its missiles are a defensive capability not subject to negotiation. A French-flagged liquefied natural gas tanker reporting successful transit along the Strait of Hormuz hours after the signing of the MOU, the first such passage since the start of this conflict. And we're joined by Kate Fisher reporting for CNA from Washington, D.C. Kate, the U.S. President, this on the missile or Iran's ballistic missile program. Donald Trump saying it would be unfair for Iran not to have these missiles if other countries already have them. Does this reflect a softening in Washington on this long-standing difficult issue?
Yeah, it really does appear to be that, given that when this conflict began, Donald Trump even stated that this was an objective of his military aggression against Iran, was to dismantle the missile program. But here we have him saying yesterday that he actually thinks maybe that's a little bit unfair, and that anyway, ballistic missiles are not the same as nuclear missiles. So it's clear that that has been deprioritized. It's not mentioned in this Memorandum of Understanding, which is focused really on the Strait of Hormuz, sanctions relief and the nuclear program. And it is another example, perhaps, of how priorities have changed for the Trump administration since they began this military action in Iran.
Mr. Trump already facing some criticism from both supporters and opponents of this war. What are they saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the biggest problems that a lot of members of his Republican Party who have a hawkish stance on Iran, they have saying that essentially what has this war achieved, given that this Memorandum of Understanding really is just kind of getting things that were already in place before the conflict began. Things like Iran promising not to have a nuclear weapon. Well, that's something they have promised for many years, even though many members of the US government haven't necessarily believed them. That is something they promised. And also the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. Clearly that was open to traffic until this conflict began, and it was open toll-free. Now the Iranians are talking about, after this 60-day period, they want to implement tolls for shipping in that strait. So a lot of the criticism here in the US of this deal is that actually, what does the US gain from this? It only kind of goes back to the status quo, and perhaps even worse than the status quo, while at the same time it gives Iran many of the things they have long wanted, notably a lifting of sanctions on their oil trade, which means they're able to sell oil that they weren't before this conflict began. So there is a lot of criticism here in the US. Donald Trump responding to that on his Truth Social, saying that what do these fools think? Oil prices are tumbling, and the economy is going to be soaring again. Wall Street is doing really well. But if you split screen that with what we heard yesterday from the new chairman of the Federal Reserve, Kevin Walsh, appointed by Donald Trump, and he suggested that his main focus was trying to bring inflation down, and the fact he couldn't lower interest rates, what's something that Donald Trump has been wanting for a long time, is because of the inflationary situation, which of course has been caused by this war in Iran.
Well, thanks, Kate Fisher there for CNA from Washington, D.C. Let's cross now to Blake Sifton. He's tracking the Israeli perspective for CNA. He joins us live from Tel Aviv. Blake, we're hearing there from Kate. So shifting of priorities on Iran's ballistic missile program that might be reason for some dismay in Israel. Meanwhile, Israel reportedly holding talks with the U.S. on keeping its troops in Lebanon, despite this MOU also promising that there will be no more fighting on the Lebanese front. What leverage does Israel have?
Good evening, Wei Su. That's right. A senior Israeli official said to be close to Prime Minister Netanyahu has told the Reuters news agency that Israel is holding stubborn negotiations with the United States on their continued presence in southern Lebanon. And he said that Israel is unlikely to back down on this issue. Of course, Prime Minister Netanyahu, as well as Israel's defense minister, have vowed that Israel will maintain their presence in southern Lebanon as long as is necessary. Now, in terms of leverage, of course, they could torpedo this entire deal between Iran and the United States by continuing their attacks in southern Lebanon, because Iran has explicitly threatened to respond to those Israeli attacks. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump are known to regularly hold phone conversations, and the Israeli Prime Minister is understood to have considerable sway over President Trump. But their relationship is said to be straining over this deal between Iran and the United States. Israel is very upset about the lack of ballistic missiles being mentioned in this agreement. It was the elimination of their ballistic missile program. Iran's ballistic missile program was one of Israel's, central war aims. In addition, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that these phone calls between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu are growing increasingly hostile over the situation in Lebanon, with President Trump reportedly saying of the Prime Minister that he wants to bomb everyone. And in a further sign of this growing tension, local media here in Israel are reporting that Prime Minister Netanyahu's Likud party have scrapped an election ad campaign that was meant to highlight the close relationship between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, because voters here in Israel now view that relationship as a detriment rather than an attribute because of how bad this deal is viewed in Israel.
Now, this apparent rift between Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump will not be helped by Israel, at least at this point, still continuing strikes on Lebanon.
No, that's right. And today we heard from Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson. They said that if Israel continues to maintain their presence in southern Lebanon, that it would mean the annulment of this Memorandum of Understanding between Iran and the United States. And he added, "We cannot talk about ending the war while parts of Lebanese territory remain under occupation." Now, today the Israeli military published a map highlighting the large swaths of southern Lebanon that the Israeli military is occupying, and they said that they would not be leaving. And as you say, Israeli attacks in southern Lebanon are continuing today. At least 2 people are reported to have been killed in separate drone strikes in the south, with others injured in further drone strikes. And Hezbollah is also targeting Israeli soldiers. Today, the military announced that 1 soldier was killed and 7 others injured, including a colonel and a lieutenant colonel, in a bomb that targeted them as they were walking along the Litani River in southern Lebanon.
Oh, thanks. Blake Sifton there reporting for CNA live from Tel Aviv with Israeli perspective on this MOU between Iran and the United States.